Varys stood by the flickering light of a half-spent candle in a hidden chamber below the Red Keep, all robed in black and still as a statue. He traced a trembling hand over the cold stone wall, where a hidden door sealed itself from any prying eyes. Although his nerves were frayed, his face remained as calm and inscrutable as ever. He had made an art of concealing his emotions, for even in solitude, the habits of a lifetime were not easily shed. Tonight, he would break a vow he had long whispered to himself, the vow to serve only the realm above all else. And he would do it for something greater, something that would appear as betrayal to many. He would do it for magic, for the ancient powers that had once bound this world together in wondrous and terrible ways. He held in his other hand a small wooden box carved with symbols known to but a select few Gari. Curved lines interlaced with intricate knots formed images of dragons, stags, wolves, roses, lions, and krakens, a tapestry of the great houses of Westeros. And yet there was something else there, older glyphs weaving among the heraldry. Runes that had survived from the Age of Heroes, from the time when the first men stood against the forces beyond the wall, and perhaps from ages even older still. Inside the box lay an ancient object of uncertain power, a stone rumored to have been shaped by children who lived long before the first men landed. Varys felt an uncharacteristic tremor of awe each time he opened the lid and touched it, as though the stone itself breathed warmth into his palm. He feared it, respected it, and above all else understood the threat and promise it represented. He thought back on the path that had led him here. He had always prided himself on neutrality, on being the one spider who spun an unseen web that held the realm together. His little bird sang truths to him, and with those truths he maneuvered behind kings and queens, ensuring that no tyrant gained absolute power. But when dragons returned, and the White Walkers threatened to sweep the world into eternal night, magic had likewise awakened. It had seeped from the hidden corners of the earth. It was no longer the hush of old stories whispered around campfires. It was real, alive, and terrifying. Yet, in the wake of victory, once that great threat was put to rest, Varys observed the turning tide. There were many who believed that magic was too unpredictable, too threatening, and that it must be banished once more into oblivion. They believed in reason and steel, in controlling the realm through laws, not the unpredictable swirl of sorcery. Varys knew a vow was being laid in secret councils, to silence magic for good. But a world without magic, he now believed, was a world where shadows lurked in deeper corners, waiting for their moment to pounce. Varys had seen a glimmer of truth. Though men might scorn or suppress sorcery, though they might kill dragons and burn weirwood trees, the darkness that lay beyond mortal comprehension would not so easily relent. Banishing magic would only weaken the defenses the realm had against it. The threat was cyclical after all. The realm would not remain safe forever if magic were suffocated. When the next threat came, and in Varys' mind, there was always a next threat. There would be no dragons, no miraculous powers, no awakened guardians to defend the living. In the still darkness, he laid a gentle hand on the wall, found the hidden catch by memory alone, and let the door swing open. The chamber beyond was cramped and half-lit by guttering lanterns. Scrolls were scattered everywhere, piled high on a small wooden table, each bearing a crest or name that most in Westeros believed lost. There were tomes from the Citadel that no one spoke of openly, and archaic scrawlings from obscure lands east of the Bone Mountains. Even a few volumes from Asshai, scribbled in tongues that could scarcely be deciphered by men. Varys had spent countless nights here, poring over them, gleaning what knowledge he could. He had tapped old alliances, called in every favor from his network of whispers across the narrow sea, and begun to piece together an ancient puzzle. It was not just about how to keep the realm safe. It was about how to keep magic alive, to ensure the world was never again so vulnerable. The hour was late, and he had begun to wonder if his co-conspirator would arrive. The wind outside moaned through the cracks in the walls, and beyond the Red Keep's fortress, somewhere in the city, a drunken brawl broke out on the streets. Fleeting sounds of steel meeting steel, of curses in the night, soon died out. King's Landing, for all its pomp and intrigue, was but a rotting sprawl, and Varys's own past in this city reminded him that this place was no shining capital. He had survived an unspeakable fate in this place once, leaving him mutilated, leaving him with a hatred and fear of magic. And yet now, in the twilight of his own long game, he was about to become one of its protectors. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, soft at first, then approaching with deliberate urgency. Varys lifted the lantern from the table and stood at the threshold. A hooded figure slipped inside the chamber, and Varys wasted no time shutting the hidden door behind them. He lowered the lantern to reveal the face of Kinvara, a priestess of the Lord of Light who had once come to Meereen in Daenerys' days of conquest. A faint glow, warm and unsettling, emanated from her red robes. "I can sense the stone," she said immediately, her voice low and husky with reverence. "I could sense it from the moment I stepped into the Red Keep." Varys offered no greeting. Too much was at stake. "Did you come alone?" he asked quietly, scanning her eyes for any sign of duplicity. Kinvara nodded. "As you instructed, Lord Varys. I have no wish to see it fall into the wrong hands either." They exchanged a brief look filled with uneasy alliance. They had been enemies once, each suspicious of the other's motives. Kinvara had claimed that Varys' mutilation had been orchestrated by a higher power. He had despised her certainty. Yet now they stood side by side, on the brink of preserving something that might one day save the realm. Varys led her to the table and gently opened a carved box. Inside rested a dull, grayish stone about the size of an egg. It was irregular, etched with swirling shapes not dissimilar to the glyphs on the box. Kinvara inhaled sharply and extended a trembling hand, but she drew back before touching it, as though fearing she might lose herself in its power. "They call it the Heart of the Dawn," said Varys. He had practiced the lines many times in his mind, ever since the stone had come into his possession, though I suspect it has had many names over the millennia. My little birds have risked a great deal to bring it here from the ruins outside Old Valyria. The Citadel's stricter maesters whisper that it is an artifact capable of altering the very nature of magic in the land. "Then," Kinvara's eyes flicked up to his. "And how do you plan to use it?" "Not I," Varys said, with a slender, mirthless smile. "Whoa, you, me, and the few others who understand what's at stake." Kinvara leaned closer, her voice almost reverent. This stone was rumored to predate the freehold of Valyria, even the blood sorcery that fueled the Valyrians' dragon breeding. Some of my fellow Red Priests believe it may have been born in the fires of creation, a place we cannot fully comprehend. Then, he watched her with a cool composure, though inside, a part of him recoiled at her dogmatic fervor. "Save me the sermon, dear priestess. We do not have time to debate. We know the realm's new council means to eradicate all traces of magic they can find. I have listened to their closed-door sessions. There are quiet proposals to ban any practice of sorcery, to dismantle whatever knowledge the Citadel holds that might encourage it, and to track down remaining worshippers of foreign gods. The rumor is they would even go so far as to ground dragons, should any eggs hatch anew." "Now," Kinvara frowned. "Fools. Have they not learned from the War for the Dawn?" Varys let out a faint sigh. "Men forget. They rejoice in victory and vow never to repeat their mistakes, but their memories grow short. They think they are forging a future of order and reason, but they will leave the world defenseless against the next unimaginable threat." "Menso." Kinvara's gaze drifted back to the stone. "So you wish for me to harness it? With this artifact, we might reignite the embers of magic. Ensure it lives on." Varys' voice dropped to a hush. "I do not pretend to know exactly how it works. Scrolls from Ashai say it can bond with a living conduit of magic, fueling and expanding its influence far beyond what has been possible since the Age of Legends. But it is said to require a sacrifice, the nature of which is not entirely clear. The truth is, I came to you out of necessity. My knowledge of sorcery is limited. Your order has studied it more than anyone else I know. I suspect you can glean a path forward." Nemdun Sao. There was a flicker of triumph in her eyes, but she tempered it with a solemn nod. "We must tread carefully. This is no ordinary trinket. If we misuse it, we could ruin entire kingdoms. Varys closed the box and took a step back. He had not realized how tightly he had been gripping the lantern until he felt the ache in his fingers. Then let us proceed with caution, and if the time is right, we will do what must be done. He paused, his voice heavy. We must keep it from those who would see magic extinguished. Kinvara nodded. I will begin the ritual soon. But first, I need to prepare a sanctuary where no prying eyes can watch. If we do it here in King's Landing, it will be discovered. He pursed his lips, considering the labyrinth of hidden passages he had spent a lifetime mastering. Then we shall need to leave the city. The question is when and how. Dawn, Kinvara said, a faint smile touching her lips. At dawn, while they all sleep and the city is at its quietest, we slip away. Varys set the lantern on the table, the flame bobbing within its glass walls, painting shifting shadows over the stone. Meet me at the mud gate. I'll have a small skiff waiting. She gave a slight bow. Until the dawn, Lord Varys. He said nothing else as she departed, for the enormity of what he planned weighed on him like a millstone. Once he committed to this course, there would be no turning back. And he wondered who would be the first to accuse him of treason. Tyrion? Ser Davos? Or perhaps the king or queen themselves, whoever sat the throne once the dust settled. He allowed his mind to drift a moment to the times he had slyly manipulated the game to save innocents, to shape rulers, to ensure the realm did not fall into chaos. This was different. This was bigger. He was turning his back on the vow to serve the realm as it currently stood. Now, he served a realm he believed must continue to wield the shield of magic against the nightmares that lurked beyond memory. The following hours felt both interminable and maddeningly brief. Varys paced in his private chambers, carefully arranging, and then rearranging a small traveling bag. He kept only the bare essentials: a pouch of coins, a few changes of clothing in dark tones, and certain coded letters that might aid him in forging alliances or disguises. The small carved box never left his sight. By candlelight, he drafted messages to far-flung contacts, half-coded instructions to remain vigilant and to spread certain rumors that might muddy the waters should anyone come searching for him. He needed to create illusions about his whereabouts, false sightings, contradictory accounts. It was the craft he had refined to an art over decades. He had learned that the secrets people least suspect are the ones hidden by 1,000 possible lies. If rumors placed him in Pentos, while others swore he was still skulking in the Red Keep, while still others claimed to see him riding north to Winterfell, it would take time for any real pursuers to sort truth from invention. And time, he believed, was his greatest ally now. As the candle burned low, the first glimmer of dawn began to pale the eastern sky. The city, for all its squalor and stench, slumbered in a brief moment of silence. Varys left his chambers, his footsteps making no sound upon the rugs. He wore a dark cloak and hood, practical clothes rather than the sumptuous silks he'd often worn by day. A pair of loyal little birds, a boy and a girl, each no older than 12, waited near a servant's exit in the Red Keep's lower halls. At a sign from Varys, they guided him through winding passages to a discreet postern door. He pressed coins into their hands and quietly reminded them of their instructions: to carry a message to Tyrion only if things went truly awry, to spread certain rumors if asked about his departure. They nodded, eyes bright with a mixture of fear and adoration that children often had for the Master of Whispers. He had no illusions about his secrecy. The Red Keep was riddled with watchers from every corner of the kingdom. Spies for Daenerys loyalists, for the Lannister remnants, for House Stark, for foreign powers. But in that pre-dawn hush, with a bit of cunning, a bit of luck, and the complacency that came from recent peace, he managed to slip away. His heart pounded as he hurried through the cramped alleys that wove between the city's outer buildings and the harbor. The stench of brine and garbage clung to the air. Fleets of fishing boats bobbed in the black water. A gray wan light tinted the horizon. Varys found the skiff tied to a half-rotten dock near the mud gate. Kinvara was already there, her red robes hidden beneath a dark cloak of her own. She carried a small satchel, and he could imagine it was filled with the tools of her trade. Incense, powders, relics of Aelor? Neither spoke as they slipped into the skiff. Varys cast off, taking the oar, and Kinvara helped guide them through the glassy water. The hush felt ominous, the sort of quiet that heralded a storm. The city receded behind them, and eventually, they maneuvered toward a larger cog waiting farther out in Blackwater Bay. A single lantern burned at the ship's prow, signaling them. Varys's contact, a captain from Lys, offered discreet passage for a tidy sum of gold. By the time they reached the cog, the sun was only just cresting the horizon, painting the sky a muted orange. Varys climbed aboard after Kinvara, carefully concealing the box beneath his cloak. The Lyseni captain, a gaunt man with sharp features, spoke little. He merely acknowledged Varys with a curt nod, then ordered his small crew to make haste. Soon, the sails caught the wind, and King's Landing began to shrink on the horizon. The day passed slowly on the water. Kinvara spent most of it in quiet prayer at the prow, her eyes fixed on the horizon or shut in silent meditation. Varys lingered near the stern, lost in thought. He watched gulls wheel overhead. Each time he glanced at the carved box, a host of conflicting emotions churned within him. Memories surfaced unbidden. How he had been cut long ago. How a sorcerer's voice had echoed through the darkness, chanting words that summoned a fire in which Varys' parts were burned. He had hated magic then, hated its cruelty and unpredictability. But that same night, he had heard something in the flames. Something that had haunted him since. Over the years, he had come to suspect that the realm's future might depend on powers beyond mortal comprehension. Shortly before sunset, the captain steered them toward a tiny inlet along the coastline, well south of Crackclaw Point. It was a desolate stretch of shore, devoid of any settlement. Only scraggly brush and tall grasses lined the rocky beach. They dropped anchor at a safe distance, and Varys and Kinvara made for the shore in a rowboat. The captain gave Varys a final salute, then turned the cog back out to sea, content his gold had been well earned for minimal risk. For a moment, Varys felt a pang of regret, leaving the city of intrigues behind. But he was forging a new path now, one that might reshape the fate of every kingdom. He and Kinvara made camp at the edge of the brush, where the land sloped upward into rolling hills. As darkness fell, they lit no fire, wary of drawing attention. They shared water and a bit of salted fish in silence, each mindful of the monumental step they were about to take. When the moon rose, white and cold in the sky, Kinvara looked to Varys with a serious expression. "We should not tarry. My visions have led me to a place deeper inland, where an ancient stone circle rests. It is there, I believe, that the magic of the Heart of the Dawn might be awakened safely." "Then thou?" Varys exhaled, nodding. "How far?" "A few hours' journey at most," she replied. They collected their meager belongings. The night air was cool, salted with the tang of the sea. They trekked inland, guided by the moonlight and by Kinvara's uncanny sense of direction. Varys walked with the carved box clutched beneath his cloak, feeling its weight like a heartbeat against his ribs. Now and then, he heard strange sounds in the distance, animals stirring, or the wind sighing through the grasses. He glanced over his shoulder more than once, half expecting a shadow of the realm's watchers to appear on horseback, swords bared. But no one emerged. They were alone. Eventually, they climbed a small ridge, and beyond it lay a clearing, ringed with half-buried stones that jutted out of the earth like the teeth of a colossal beast. Moonlight revealed strange carvings on some of the stones, worn down by centuries of wind and rain. The ground here felt different beneath Varys' boots, as though it hummed with a faint residue of power. Kinvara pressed a hand to one of the stones, closing her eyes, and then nodded. "This place once belonged to the children of the forest," she murmured. "Perhaps men used it for their own rights later, but it is older than any record in the Citadel's vaults." Her voice wavered with awe. "We must be cautious." Varys set his bag down near the edge of the circle. "Cautious, yes," he agreed softly. "Show me what must be done." Kinvara stooped, removing several pouches and candles from her satchel. She arranged them at precise intervals between the stones. Next, she drew out a small bowl inscribed with glowing glyphs that shifted as though alive with embers. Into it, she poured a mixture of powders and oils. A pungent scent filled the air, redolent of myrrh and something richer, almost metallic. She began to chant in a low voice, in that strange tongue of hers, calling on Aralor. The words seeped into the clearing, dancing with the moonlight in an eerie symphony. Varys watched intently. He felt a whisper of dread. His entire life, he had taken pride in being the spider of the realm, weaving subtle webs. Now, standing in an ancient circle while a red priestess chanted incantations, he realized he was stepping onto a stage far older and more profound than the petty politics of men. The carved box seemed to grow warm under his palm. He lifted the lid, revealing the grayish stone within, the heart of the dawn. As the chanting built, Kinvara turned her gaze to Varys, eyes aglow with reflected moonlight. "You must set it on the ground within the circle," she said, "and stand back." Varys drew the stone out. A shiver raced up his spine at the warmth it radiated. He placed it carefully in the center of the ring. The moment it touched the ground, a faint tremor ran through the clearing. The night air thickened with tension. Kinvara continued her chant, and the candles around the circle flared to life with bright, golden flames, though no one had touched them with a spark. Varys retreated to the edge, half in fear, half in astonishment. Kinvara lifted the bowl overhead, letting the mixture of powders and oils drift into the breeze. The smoke coiled in tendrils of red and gold around the circle. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo beyond her own, Kinvara spoke. "Lord of Light, we summon thee. We stand upon sacred ground older than the kingdoms of men. We ask not for destruction, but for preservation. Let the heart of the dawn shine once more, a beacon in the darkness. Let it awaken the gifts that keep the night at bay. Let it awaken the gifts that keep the night at bay." As she spoke, a faint glow began to emanate from the stone at the center. It pulsed, like the slow beat of a dragon's heart. The ground beneath Varys' feet seemed to shift, as though something deep underground stirred in response. Fear twisted in his gut. He thought of running, thought of stopping this madness. But he remembered what was at stake, the next great threat, the powerless realm if magic died. He steadied himself. The pulsing glow intensified, and the circle of stones hummed with energy. Kinvara's eyes gleamed with fiery light as she placed her hands over the stone. A sudden wind roared through the clearing, snuffing out the candles. The moonlight seemed to thicken, casting everything in ethereal silver. Then came a flash of golden radiance from the stone, and Kinvara cried out. In that blast of brilliance, Varys glimpsed shapes coiling in the air. Images of dragons, of direwolves, of swirling mist. The symbols from the box flickered around them like dancing phantoms. Then all went silent. The wind died, the glow faded, and the clearing lay in darkness once more. Kinvara slumped to her knees, breath ragged, while the stone at the center flickered with faint golden veins. Varys exhaled slowly, stepping forward with caution. "Is it done?" Kinvara gazed at him with trembling awe. "The heart has been awakened, but not fully kindled. Its power stirs. I sense a link to the living magic of this land." Uralor responds. A note of dread crept into her voice. "But there is something else, an older presence that does not belong to the Red God. The stone answers to more than one call." "Another presence?" he asked. She nodded, eyes dark. "I know not what it is. Perhaps the lingering spirit of the children who once guarded this place, or something else that predates even them." Varys felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Then we must ensure no one else gains control over it." Kinvara rose, leaning on one of the ancient stones for support. "You must carry it. My role is to guide and protect the magic as best I can, but you are the one who brought it here, the one who offers its sanctuary." You alone can keep it from the hands of those who would see it destroyed. Nendo. I do not relish that task, Varys said dryly, though he bent to retrieve the stone. It felt warm still, but steadier now, as though it recognized him. He slipped it back into the carved box, closed the lid, and exhaled a breath of relief when he found it no heavier than before. We cannot stay here, said Kinvara. The ritual's traces will linger for those with the skill to sense them. We should keep moving, away from the roads, away from prying eyes. Mentiontine. Together, they stepped out of the stone circle into the tall grass. The night was still. Overhead, the moon seemed distant, as though the clearing lay in some other realm. They walked a short distance, found a place sheltered by a stand of trees, and decided to rest. Varys found it difficult to sleep, half expecting shadows to slither up and throttle him. But eventually, exhaustion claimed him, and he drifted into a fitful doze, the carved box clutched close. At dawn, they broke what little camp they had and continued northward, skirting the roads. The land rolled in gentle hills, dotted with pockets of forest. Now and then they spotted a distant farmhouse or a traveler on horseback along the main roads. Each time they concealed themselves, anxious to leave as few witnesses as possible. They had no illusions that if the rumor of an awakened artifact of magic began to spread, they would be hunted by more than mere sellswords. They pressed on, day after day, forging an odd partnership. Varys guided them with cunning and knowledge of the land's networks of trade and rumor. Kinvara offered her uncanny senses, warning him of potential watchers or dangers. Each night they camped in secluded glades, continuing small rituals to keep the stone stable. One late afternoon, as they neared a narrow stream in the woodlands, they halted. Varys had spied smoke curling through the trees. Human activity, perhaps a small encampment. He signaled Kinvara to keep silent, and they crept closer to investigate. A group of 5 men sat around a modest fire, their horses tied nearby. They wore a mix of leathers and tarnished chainmail. Their sigils were hidden, if they bore any. Sellswords, perhaps, or brigands. Varys and Kinvara exchanged glances. They were outnumbered. Best to avoid contact. As they began to back away, one of the men startled them by calling out, "Who goes there?" Varys froze. A branch had snapped under his foot. Kinvara glanced at him, and he saw a flicker of red in her gaze, but he shook his head. He did not want violence if it could be helped. Carefully, he stepped into view, hands raised. Just travelers seeking a safe crossing, he said with a placating smile. We have no quarrel. The men eyed them with suspicion. One stood, resting a hand on the pommel of his sword. Travelers out here? Not many folk choose these paths. We prefer solitude, Varys replied smoothly, stepping forward a bit to draw attention from Kinvara. We'll be on our way. No trouble from us. The man tilted his head, squinting. Strange pair, you two. The lady in red, and a bald fellow with fancy speech. Who might you be? Merchants from Essos, Varys lied seamlessly, his voice courteous. Seeking to reach the Vale with some specialty goods. Now, if you'll excuse us. Another man rose, a grin on his scarred face. Perhaps these specialty goods might interest us. He moved closer. Come now. Show us what you carry. Varys forced a smile. I'm afraid we have nothing of value to sellswords. We trade in herbs and potions for maesters. Herbs and potions, eh? The man's tone was mocking. Might fetch a price if they're worth a maester's coin. Let's see. Varys could tell they wouldn't let him pass without a search, and he could not allow them to find the box. His heart hammered. We'd be happy to pay a toll, he ventured. How about 20 gold dragons to let us pass in peace? The sum was steep, but he reasoned that losing coin was preferable to fighting. The men exchanged greedy glances. Scarface sneered. Hand it over then. 20 gold dragons and we'll let you go. Varys nodded, sliding his pack from his shoulder, rummaging as though for a coin purse. But as he did, a shadow flickered in the corner of his eye. Kinvara. She had stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the men, her lips moving in a silent incantation. The air seemed to shimmer with heat. The men noticed too. One shouted, "Witch!" and fumbled for his sword. A sudden swirl of flame leapt from Kinvara's fingers, spiraling toward the men. They scrambled back, cursing, as the small fire streaked through the air. It struck the ground short of them, a warning shot. Fear flashed in their eyes. Scarface snarled, "Kill the sorceress!" And two of them lunged forward, blades bared. Varys' instincts flared. He ducked behind a tree just as one man's sword slashed past. Kinvara, with another chant, conjured a swirl of heat, but her powers were not as strong in broad daylight without preparation. The flame flickered, more flash than substance. One sellsword managed to break through, knocking her to the ground. He raised his sword high, intending to cleave her in two. Without thinking, Varys darted forward, yanking a small dagger from his belt, an implement he rarely used, but which he carried out of necessity. He drove it into the man's side just as the blade came crashing down. The angle was off, so the blow missed Kinvara's head and instead glanced off the ground, sending sparks flying. The man grunted in pain and staggered. Another man aimed a crossbow at Varys. "Stop, or I'll put a bolt in your heart." Varys froze. He felt no shame in admitting terror. Kinvara, struggling to stand, took advantage of the distraction. She flung her hand outward, and a wave of heat blossomed, igniting the brush at the men's feet. Fire rushed up their legs, causing them to drop weapons and shriek. The man with the crossbow loosed a wild bolt that flew harmlessly overhead. In the ensuing panic, the remaining sellswords fled, dragging their wounded comrade with them. One fell to the ground, flames consuming his trousers, and rolled desperately in the dirt, cursing. Another seized him by the arms, and together they stumbled away, vanishing into the trees. Varys stood shaking, dagger still in his hand, as the brush fire crackled. Kinvara staggered to her feet, chest heaving. "Are you hurt?" he managed to ask, wiping sweat from his brow. She shook her head, though her robes were singed. "I'll live." Before the fire could spread further, she knelt and murmured a few words, summoning a sudden gust of wind that smothered the flames. Varys blinked, impressed despite himself. But the fear lingered. He realized how dangerous their journey would be. The land was rife with men who cared nothing for the realm or for magic. And these were just brigands, easily frightened by a show of power. More serious threats would come once word of their activity spread. They collected themselves, scanning the area to ensure none of the sellswords remained. Then they pressed on, hearts pounding. Varys led them deeper into the forest, determined to put as much distance as possible between them and that ill-fated encounter. That evening they made camp by a shallow stream, where they drank and tended to their wounds. Varys had a bruised shoulder, and Kinvara's arms bore several cuts. She insisted on treating them with a salve from her own pouch, a concoction that stung fiercely but sealed the wounds quickly. They spoke little until the sun had fully set and the stars came out. Only then did Varys summon the courage to address what had happened. "We can't afford attention," he said softly, gazing at the faint glow of the carved box beside him. "The more we display sorcery, the greater the chance tales will spread. We must keep a low profile." Kinvara met his gaze with an unwavering stare. "And if we are attacked again, would you have me do nothing?" He sighed. "No, I merely wish to emphasize caution. We survive in shadows, not open flame." She nodded reluctantly. "I will be prudent. But be warned, Spider. The longer we bear this artifact, the more it sings to powers unseen. We might not remain hidden forever." Varys bowed his head, acknowledging the truth. The tension in his chest tightened further. He thought about turning back, about giving up this mad quest. But the memory of that ancient circle, the pulses of power in the stone, and the knowledge of what would be lost if magic died, these compelled him onward. In the days that followed, they continued northward, crossing tributaries and old footpaths, heading toward the mountains of the Vale. Varys had a plan to circle around the Vale's southern edge, and eventually cross the mountains into the lightly populated highland passes, where fewer eyes lurked. From there, Perhaps they would find safe haven in the ruins of some old fortress, or even in the wilds near the mountains of the moon. The traveling was grueling, the nights cold, and the constant vigilance exhausting. They ate little, mostly dried bread, smoked fish, and whatever game Kinvara could snare. Each evening, she performed small rites with the stone, keeping it in tune with the land's subtle currents. Often, she muttered about the presence of some other force in the artifact. Something intangible and ancient that resisted her attempts to bind it to Erlor's will. One night, while the wind howled through the pass they sheltered in, Varys asked, "Have you determined what this other presence is?" Kinvara shook her head, her face grave in the firelight. "It resists, yet I can sense curiosity, even longing, as though it yearns for something or someone." Varys eyed the stone, the faint glow in its veins. Could it be the spirits of the children, or something from the Age of Dawn? She shrugged. "Perhaps. I fear I lacked the knowledge to coax it to reveal itself. We might need assistance from those who dwell in the far corners of the world. Perhaps the Shadowbinders of Asshai, or the ghost priests of the Thousand Islands. But we cannot trust them lightly. Now." He nodded in grim understanding. Most practitioners of magic had agendas of their own. Entrusting the heart of the dawn to them might be akin to handing a sword to a would-be tyrant. They lapsed into silence, each lost in thought. Despite their best efforts, rumor of a red-robed sorceress and a bald companion carrying an eerie box began to spread. By the time they skirted past the outskirts of a small village near the Riverlands, Varys picked up scraps of gossip from a tavern stable boy. He overheard references to a mysterious pair who had conjured flames to fend off brigands, who had been seen heading north. It was only a matter of time before those rumors reached the ears of bigger fish. Lords, knights, perhaps even the Crown's new spymasters. They pressed forward, tension mounting with each league. Kinvara's nightly rituals became more urgent. She spent hours meditating, chanting quietly over the stone, as though comforting it. Varys seldom slept more than a few hours, haunted by nightmares of men in gold cloaks closing in, or the hiss of a dragon's roar overhead. Betraying the realm for the sake of preserving magic, he tried to reconcile that with the ideals he once held dear. Part of him seethed at the hypocrisy. Once, he had opposed the notion of magic wholeheartedly, seeing it as a dangerous tool in the hands of cruel men. Now he risked everything to ensure it persisted. Was that not a profound betrayal of himself? But the memory of the White Walkers, the knowledge of how close the world had come to eternal darkness, reminded him that magic was the shield. If they lost it, the next long night would be unstoppable. Near the edge of the Mountains of the Moon, where the air grew thinner and the wind sharper, they found an old watchtower perched on a rocky outcrop. Its stones were cracked with age, the upper levels collapsed. No banner flew. It seemed abandoned. Varys and Kinvara agreed to investigate, hoping to find brief shelter. They climbed the winding path, passing through a half-broken gate. The courtyard was overgrown with weeds and littered with fallen stones. The watchtower's ground floor remained intact enough to offer a roof overhead. They spent a day there, resting, rationing their dwindling supplies. Kinvara performed her rituals beneath the tower's roof, protected from the gusts. Varys took stock of their condition. Their journey had stretched longer and more perilous than he'd imagined. If help did not come soon, or if they could not forge a safe sanctuary, they might wander these mountains until hunger and exposure claimed them, or until their pursuers found them. At sunset on the second day, as Varys stood atop the collapsed remnants of the second floor, gazing out over the jagged peaks, he heard a distant rumble. Hoofbeats. Several riders. He clutched his small spyglass, an object from his bag, and peered down the rocky slope. Shadows danced in the twilight, but the shapes were unmistakable. A party of mounted figures approaching. Could be travelers, but he doubted it. They moved with purpose, scanning the terrain. His chest tightened. Scrambling back down, he found Kinvara near the flickering lantern. "We have visitors," he said quietly. Riders, at least 10 of them. They look organized. Her face paled slightly. Do you think they have come for us? Who else would they come for, in these desolate heights? We must assume they know we're here. Then we run, she said. We gather our things and slip away before they arrive. Varys closed his eyes, thinking. The watchtower had only one real path up, unless they attempted to scale the back of the mountain. But that was sheer, treacherous rock, not easily climbed in a hurry. The riders would spot them. Running might not be feasible, he said grimly. We'll need to hide or confront them. Kinvara lifted her chin. Then we confront them with the flame of our lore. He put a hand on her arm. We do not know who they are. If they serve a tolerant lord, we might bribe or reason with them. If they serve the crown, it could be more complicated. They doused their lantern and crouched behind the crumbled wall, peering through a gap into the courtyard. Night descended swiftly, but the riders bore torches, illuminating their approach. The first few riders entered the courtyard, glancing around with stern expressions. Varys counted them. 12 in total, all wearing a uniform of gray cloaks pinned with a sigil he couldn't make out from this distance. They looked well equipped, though not as fine as a lord's household guard. Possibly a mercenary company, or the retinue of a lesser lord. One figure dismounted, stepping forward with the grace of a practiced fighter. Kinvara tensed at Varys' side. What do we do? Before he could respond, a voice carried through the courtyard. We know you're here. Show yourselves. That voice, resonant and laced with authority, sent a jolt through Varys. It was familiar. Carefully, he peered around the rubble to see who had spoken. The figure strode into the torchlight. A woman, lean, wearing leather armor. Her hair was short, dark, with a trace of gray. A face he recognized. One of the best fighters and a cunning operative in her own right. The Lady Brienne of Tarth. Varys's mind reeled. Brienne was no mercenary. She had once been part of the king's guard under a certain regime, and after the wars, she had roamed the realm, fulfilling oaths to protect the innocent and uphold justice. Her presence here might indicate she was hunting them for a higher cause. Or perhaps she had come on some other errand. Either way, it was no coincidence. He whispered to Kinvara. That's Brienne of Tarth, known for her unwavering loyalty and sense of honor. She might attempt to arrest us, but she is not cruel. Then perhaps we can reason, Kinvara said carefully. The voice echoed again. Lord Varys, I know you're here. We only wish to talk. Please, come out. Varys' stomach churned. They knew precisely who they sought. So the news had indeed traveled. He motioned for Kinvara to stay low. Slowly, he stood, stepping out into the courtyard, hands raised. The torchlight revealed him. Brienne's eyes landed on him, and a flicker of relief crossed her features, mixed with steeled resolve. Do not harm him, she ordered her men. Then she addressed Varys. We have been tracking you for weeks. The crown demands answers. Varys forced a smile. It's been some time, Lady Brienne. I see you come with an entourage. She nodded. I serve no direct lord at present. I'm acting on behalf of the regents in King's Landing. They fear you've stolen an artifact of dangerous sorcery. They suspect you plan treason. A subtle dryness tinged his tone. Treason? Lady Brienne, you know me better than that. I serve the realm. Now. Her gaze hardened. That is what the crown believed, until you vanished. Now they say you're meddling with a Red Priestess. At that, Kinvara emerged from the shadows, arms crossed. The men around Brienne tensed, hands going to sword hilts. Varys quickly raised his hands. No need for violence, he said. We will talk. Brienne studied Kinvara warily. The crown demands the artifact's surrender. Whatever you carry, it cannot be allowed to roam freely, endangering the realm. My orders are to bring you back, dead or alive if necessary. I do not relish it, but I must fulfill my duty. Then, Varys' heart pounded. He glanced at Kinvara, saw the sparks in her eyes. This could turn deadly. Lady Brienne, he said carefully. Do you remember the threat of the White Walkers? How close we came to oblivion? She frowned. I do. And do you remember how magic played a vital role in defeating them? How dragons and the powers of old aided our survival? Yes, she said, though her tone was guarded. Varys spread his hands, making a desperate appeal. I have discovered that the crown seeks to suppress magic, to extinguish it for fear of further chaos. But that is folly, my lady. We need that power for the future. If another threat emerges, if the darkness returns in a new form, we will be helpless without it. I am not betraying the realm. I am trying to protect it. Brienne's expression flickered with uncertainty. They say that's how all traitors rationalize their actions. Think of my history, Varys implored. Have I ever sought power for myself? I've served. I've sacrificed. I have no claim to the throne, nor do I want one. Then Trau. She hesitated. The men around her shifted uneasily. One spat on the ground. He's a snake, my lady. Don't believe his forked tongue. Brienne's voice carried over them, firm. Quiet. Then she fixed her gaze on Varys. Why do you run then? Why hide this artifact, if not for ill intent? Varys sensed the narrow path he tread, balancing truth and subterfuge. He chose honesty for once. Because if the crown lays hands on it, they will destroy it. And with it, any hope that we might face the next monstrous threat. Magic is not an evil to be stamped out. It is a force that can save us from evils beyond imagining. Then Xiao. Kinvara took a step forward. Lady Knight, you yourself have seen wonders in this world. Have you not? The living once fought the dead, and prevailed only by uniting powers both mundane and arcane. Will you stand by and let your lords cast that defense into the fire of ignorance? Brienne's face clouded with memories. I remember the war. I was there when the dead marched. I saw the Night King destroyed. Her gaze darted to the men who rode with her, some of whom looked skeptical. She took a deep breath. I also remember how magic can bring horrors, but I cannot deny that in the end it was essential. Hope flared in Varys' chest. Please, Lady Brienne, do not force our hand. We do not wish to fight. Let us continue our work. When the time comes, the realm will thank you. Her jaw tightened. Duty warred with conscience in her eyes. She glanced back at her men who were growing restless. My orders are to return you to King's Landing, or to ensure you no longer pose a threat. If I let you go, I risk being branded a traitor myself. Sauce. One of the riders barked. We can't just let them pass. Varys felt sweat trickle down his brow. I will not allow myself to be taken. Not when the crown has abandoned reason. For a tense moment, no one spoke. Torchlight flickered across the courtyard's rubble. The men shifted in their saddles, half expecting an explosion of sorcery. Brienne looked at Varys, her eyes a tumult of conflicting loyalties. Finally, in a quiet, measured voice, she asked, If I let you go, will you swear to use this artifact only for the realm's protection? I do, Varys said, heartfelt. I swear it by the gods old and new, by the memory of every innocent life lost in the wars. She inhaled deeply. I have never known you to break a vow to protect the people, Varys. Her men began to protest, but Brienne silenced them with a raised hand. I am in command here. This is my decision. If any of you wish to challenge it, you may return to King's Landing and denounce me. I will stand by my choice. A murmur of discontent rippled through the group, but few seemed eager to challenge the formidable knight. Brienne looked back at Varys. Go, and pray that you're right about this. Because if you fail, if you let darkness loose upon the realm, then that falls on your shoulders. He bowed low. Thank you, my lady. May the gods bless you for your mercy. Without further words, Varys and Kinvara gathered their things and slipped into the watchtower's ruined interior, heading out the back. It took a swift climb over precarious rubble, but soon they were descending the rocky slopes, away from Brienne and her men. The tension in Varys' chest eased, though he felt a pang of guilt. He had forced her to risk her own standing, to go against her orders, all for his cause. But his cause was vital. They traveled into the high mountains, forging across rugged passes that tested their endurance. Days blurred together. Nights were cold, haunted by howling winds. Kinvara's devotion to the stone grew. She spoke to it in hushed tones, telling it stories of the Lord of Light, urging it to remain patient. Sometimes, Varys thought he saw flickers of shapes in the corner of his vision, vague silhouettes near the box, or fleeting glows at its edges. He wondered if the stone was growing in power, or if his fatigue conjured illusions. At length, they reached a steep valley that opened onto a hidden lake, its surface a mirror to the sky. Towering pine trees draped the shores. The place felt untouched, sheltered by the mountains. Here, they decided to rest for a time, to recover and to plan their next move. Varys believed that if they could build a secure refuge, perhaps eventually gather a small circle of allies who understood the necessity of magic, they might protect the stone long enough for it to root itself in the land's vitality. Then it would be beyond mortal destruction. They established a modest camp near the lake's edge, crafting a lean-to from fallen branches, gathering berries, and attempting to fish. Kinvara spent the daylight hours performing meditations with the stone, half submerged in the lake's icy waters, chanting in some lost dialect. Varys watched from the shore, arms folded, cloak wrapped tight. This had become his new life, forging a sanctuary for an artifact that might one day decide the fate of the realm. He sat beside the lake one afternoon, pondering the path ahead. Perhaps in time, he might recruit others who still believed in the power of magic as a force for good. The Archmaester who studied occult lore in secret, maybe a few surviving red priests with more measured temperaments. Even certain followers of the old gods in the north might be persuaded. But how would they coordinate without drawing the crown's ire? The crown sought to snuff out these embers before they could ignite. A ripple on the water drew his attention. Kinvara stood, water dripping from her red robes, the stone in her hands glowing faintly. She approached the shore, face pale and strained. "It grows stronger," she said quietly. "Each day, it draws on the essence of the land. But it remains incomplete." Varys rose, helping her onto the rocky bank. "Incomplete how?" She pressed a shaking hand to her forehead. "There is a bond it seeks. A bond with a living vessel, someone who can channel its power for the realm. Right now, it is like a seed without soil, forging tenuous roots in the darkness." His stomach lurched. "So it needs a host." She nodded. "A champion, if you will. But the champion must willingly accept the risk, for it could be fatal. The stone draws life as well as power." Then, Varys' mind flashed to the memory of how the Targaryens once bonded with dragons, risking life and limb for a hold on draconic might. Now something similar was at play. Who could that champion be? Kinvara's gaze flickered. Anyone with a heart open to the realm, and a resonance with the powers that be. But not just any well-meaning fool will do. This is a perilous bond. It might kill the unworthy. Varys exhaled. "We have no shortage of devout or ambitious souls, but to find one who is truly selfless, who can handle such power without being corrupted, that may be difficult." Kinvara gave a solemn nod. "And the stone senses your presence, Lord Varys. You brought it to life. It may call to you, though you have no gift of flame or sword." "I was once a vessel for a sorcerer's cruelty," he said bitterly, recalling his mutilation. "I have no wish to repeat that nightmare." She rested a hand on his shoulder. "Nor do I. But let us not dwell on that choice, unless there is no other way." Menendao. Days turned into weeks by the lake. The weather grew colder. They built small fires, rationed their supplies. Kinvara taught Varys more about the stone's lore, gleaned from the fragments of knowledge she had. He found himself haunted by the question of a champion. But beyond that, he worried about the realm's reaction. Sooner or later, the crown might rally a larger force to hunt them, or dispatch cunning agents to do what Brienne would not. As they ventured deeper into the surrounding wilderness to gather food, they stumbled upon signs that they were not alone. Boot prints in the mud, a half-burned campfire that was not theirs, traces of horse dung. Varys's Wariness grew. They began scouting the area, sleeping in different spots each night, never leaving a clear trail. One morning, Kinvara came rushing back to their camp with alarm etched on her face. Riders approach from the west. They wear no sigils I recognize. They might be a scouting party. Varys clenched his jaw. It was only a matter of time. They doused their fire, packed their belongings, and prepared to flee deeper into the mountains. But as they crested a ridge, they saw a small squadron below, carefully checking the paths. At their head rode a cloaked figure whose face was obscured. Varys led Kinvara on a winding route, hoping to bypass them. Then, a shout echoed from below. There they are. Arrows whistled through the air. One struck a tree near Varys' head. He cursed, ducking. Kinvara flung a hand outward, summoning a wave of heat. It scattered the nearest riders, but more came. Varys and Kinvara sprinted across the rocky slope. Loose stones rolled underfoot. The pack of riders split, circling around to cut off their escape. Varys' chest burned. The carved box thumped against his side with each step. He felt the stone's faint pulse. "We can't outrun them," he gasped. Kinvara's eyes flared with desperation. "Then we make our stand. Let the heart do what it must." They found a narrow defile in the rocks, a natural choke point. Varys pressed himself against the stone wall, dagger at the ready, though he knew how futile it was. Kinvara stood in front of him, shoulders squared. The first riders burst into the defile, swords drawn. She unleashed a swirl of flame, forcing them to reel back. But as more approached, arrows began to rain in. She conjured a small barrier of heated air, igniting some of the arrows. Yet a stray shaft grazed her arm. She cried out, stumbling. Varys rushed to her side, panic choking him. The attackers pressed in, well coordinated. He saw one of them brandish a crossbow aimed right at Kinvara. Reflex took over. He stepped between them, shutting his eyes, expecting pain. A sudden burst of golden light erupted from the carved box, blazing like a newborn sun. Varys felt a jolt course through his body, hot and cold at once, as though lightning had struck him. The artifact was answering to his desperation. The riders cried out in confusion and fear, their horses rearing. In that blinding glow, Varys' mind seemed to slip into another realm. He felt an overwhelming presence, alien, ancient, immense. It roiled through him, filling every nerve with a roar of voices long dead or never born. The heart of the dawn. In that timeless instant, he sensed its longing, its purpose. To bond with a mortal vessel, to preserve magic. He heard echoes of the children's songs, the hush of the old gods, the crackle of Erlor's flames, the rush of dragons' wings. Each strain pressed upon him, beckoning him to surrender. He tried to resist, terrified. But he also felt an unshakable certainty. If he did not allow this power to flow through him, Kinvara would die, and the stone would be taken, used or destroyed by those who did not understand. The realm's future would darken. So he let go. A wave of shimmering energy blasted outward from his body, sweeping through the defile. The riders were hurled back as though struck by a giant's hand. Rocks tumbled. Horses screamed. Varys heard his own voice bellowing a cry that seemed both his and not his, echoing with supernatural resonance. The golden light burned from his eyes, his fingertips, forging webs of brilliance across the rocky ground. Time lost meaning. In that swirling maelstrom, he saw the riders flee in terror, their formation broken. The cliffs reverberated with the force of the magic unleashed. Then, as suddenly as it began, the glow subsided, and Varys crumpled to his knees, gasping for breath. Kinvara stared at him, eyes wide with shock and awe. You have bonded with it." He trembled, feeling the raw power course beneath his skin, as though the artifact had fused with his very soul. I didn't want this," he rasped. She knelt beside him, blood trickling down her arm, and gently touched his shoulder. "But it chose you, and you chose to save me. To save us. The bond is sealed." He squeezed his eyes shut, wrestling with the throbbing energy in his veins. It was as if the entire land hummed at the edge of his hearing, a chorus of hidden forces. "Then the cost is mine to bear." "Not yours alone," she whispered. "I will stand with you. The artifact's power resides in you now, but we will guide it. We will shape it for the realm." Varys lifted his head, scanning the defile. The riders had either fled or lay groaning on the ground. The path was clear. Strength returned to his limbs, and he found he could stand. A faint golden glow lingered in his eyes, and he felt an odd stirring in his chest, as though something nestled there, both comforting and terrifying. "Then we must keep moving," he said, voice trembling. "This changes everything." Kinvara helped him walk, for the magic still roiled within him, disorienting his senses. They emerged from the defile, leaving behind the moans of scattered riders, none of whom seemed eager to test the power again. Varys felt no triumph, only a profound sorrow that this was the root necessity had forced upon him. Once a eunuch, once a master of whispers, now a reluctant vessel of an ancient magic. They trekked deeper into the mountains, into the unknown. Each step, Varys felt the land underfoot more keenly. He sensed the faint thrumming of energies older than men's kingdoms, a lattice of powers binding the living realm. With each breath, a piece of that lattice tugged at him, beckoning him to guide it. He thought of the vow he'd made long ago, to serve the realm above all else. In that sense, perhaps he had never strayed. But the realm he served now was not just the crown or the city or the lords. It was the realm of the living, the entire tapestry of Westeros and beyond. Kinvara walked beside him, her gaze flicking to his every so often, concern mingling with reverence. "What do you feel?" she ventured. He swallowed hard. "Everything. Or perhaps just a piece of everything. The wind, the stone, the lingering echoes, and I sense watchers. Watchers." He nodded, heart pounding. "Far away, but present. Others who practice sorcery, they sense a new spark in the darkness." Her eyes hardened. "Then we must learn to wield this power before they come for it." Varys looked up at the night sky, dotted with cold stars. "We have to find a place to gather knowledge, somewhere the lines of magic converge, the heart of the world's power, or else we risk losing control." She gave a grim smile. "There is one place that stands above all in magical significance, the Isle of Faces, in the God's Eye. The weirwood trees there are said to be older than memory, carved by the children. It may hold the answers we seek." "And He nodded slowly, feeling the stone's presence in his chest pulse at the mention of that ancient isle. "Then that is where we must go, though the journey is perilous." They paused on a ridge overlooking a valley. Moonlight bathed the rugged slopes in pale silver. Varys allowed himself a moment to think of Tyrion, of Daenerys, of the Iron Throne, of all the kings and queens who had come and gone. How small their squabbles now seemed in the face of the power surging within him. The realm was vaster and more mysterious than any mortal crown could encompass. And so Varys pressed onward, no longer just a spider weaving webs in the shadows, but a bearer of the old world's magic, forced by necessity to betray the realm's immediate desire to stamp out the uncanny. He carried the realm's truest shield now, the spark that might one day stand between life and the next long darkness. Should the realm ever learn the depth of this betrayal, they might curse his name. But perhaps, if he succeeded, they would bless it instead, even if it took generations for them to understand. He guided Kinvara along a narrow trail that wound eastward, where the faint promise of the Isle of Faces glimmered in his mind like a distant beacon. With each step, he felt a new thread of destiny weaving around them, a quiet song of possibility. Magic would endure, and in enduring, might protect them all. He had broken his vow to serve the throne, but in so doing, he served the people, the living world, and the uncertain future that lay in wait. And perhaps that was the highest calling he could ever fulfill. They vanished into the shadows, bearing a magic older than kings, determined to save a realm that might never thank them for it. Yet Varys felt, for the first time in a long while, a sense of clarity, perhaps even hope. If betrayal was the price of preserving what the realm truly needed, then betray he would. For the realm and for magic itself. And in the quiet hush of moonlit mountains, he thought he heard an ancient chorus whispering approval, guiding his footsteps along the winding path to a fate none could foresee. 3.